Good afternoon. I am Valerie R. Austin and the author of the Student's Comprehensive Guide for College and Other Life Lessons. I wrote the book to assist high school students and their parents to navigate the journey of careers in college. I am also the host of the Employer Speaks series, which is designed to highlight different careers and the paths to achieving those careers. Today, I have a very special guest. Dr. Robert Campbell Jr. is an epidemiologist and the former assistant professor of epidemiology at Eastern Virginia Medical School of Health Professions, Master in Public Health program. Dr. Campbell has extensive experiences in health services and outcomes research in academic, federal government, military, and regulatory settings. His research incorporates health disparities and includes systematic lupus, diabetes, lung cancer, and other diseases. He's a graduate of the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina, with a bachelor's degree in modern languages, the Ohio State with a Master's of Science in Preventive Medicine, and Case Western Reserve University, where he earned a PhD in epidemiology and biostatistics. Dr. Campbell is also a retired U.S. Air Force Reserve Lieutenant Colonel with 26 years of military service. He is a 10-year-plus member of Stop Abuse, a childhood sexual abuse prevention organization, and a lifetime member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. I look forward to this discussion with Robert, where we explore the exciting career of epidemiology. Thank you for watching. The master's degree is usually the minimum education level to enter epidemic career field, although you're saying you don't need it, but it's typically. When would a public health practitioner need a PhD degree to work as an epidemiologist? Why, if you're getting a lot of things in your master's program, what's the PhD for? So you could be in charge of people? What's that about?
Well, in some cases, yeah, you've got individuals who already have masters, then the boss should, in most cases, no more than the people there.
No, you think? Oh, okay.
It doesn't always work that way. But the other thing is that, a PhD, primarily, you're needed for teaching. If you're going to be a professor, then there's a requirement to have a terminal degree. That's just for, for purposes of the schools, accreditation agencies requirements or so. That just makes sense. The FTEs are based upon doctorate level individuals. Certain biotech, biopharma groups or so, organizations are required individuals to have PhDs based upon the level of work which they'll be doing for the organization itself. Okay.
All right. Well, with that being said, how and when should undergraduate students start researching to find the best fitting master's and PhD programs for their epidemiology career goals? And actually, when should they start looking for the funding? How do they start? Google it?
But in general, most master's programs are 2 years. It took me 3 years because I had to actually collect my data for my we call my thesis or so, the research project. On average, the average time for a doctorate, a PhD, is 6 to 7 years. No shame. It took me 6.5 years. It is what it is. It's completed, but there were several challenges or so. But it could have been longer if I hadn't taken certain courses, or if I had not had a master's program. So the master's does help. Now, as I'm saying, but most programs require some form of advanced program. Advanced courses or so. But again, for a PhD program, you don't necessarily have to have a master's degree. Again, it's assumed that you would gain that master's halfway when you decided to stop. So in a sense, you're earning a master's, but most students are continuing past that phase and they'll just finish with the PhD itself. Did I answer that?
Well, again, when should they start looking for a program that's best fit? How do they do it? Do they go to the professor and say, well, what's the best school for this? Or do they start Googling their particular specialty that they want to go into? What's the best way to start, and where do they start looking for funding?
Right. I guess in any program or so, prior to your senior year, you've identified, let's say at least in college, you've identified are areas of interest. So in most cases, you've already had internships. So that more or less would lead to opportunities for funding. Let's say you're not in an internship or you're not receiving any funding at all, where do you go? Again, it's part of, reaching out to the local epidemiologist, School of Public Health, master's program which offers that, and speaking with an individual who's an epidemiologist, who's in the field, whether epidemiologist or any other particular career. So showing initial interest, there may be opportunities again to work for that individual, do some kind of research, a couple of months or whatever during the summer, or even during the year, during the school year, if you're located right there in terms of and resident. So our grants, they're a little bit harder or so. Sometimes you have to apply, but there may be some fundings available based upon the researcher. I had many opportunities whereby there was funds available for students who identified an interest in any of my research programs. So it just so happened it was included, and they were always looking for students
So what I'm getting is, if you're a student and this is something that you're looking at, either it's a passion or you're just interested in, you need to start the research to talk to people. You need to start the ability to experience what you would do as an epidemiologist, hopefully as an internship, because unfortunately students, they go to college and they do this. Oh, I have a math exam, I have a paper, but they don't look out and say, oh, what do I do after college?
Right. Yeah, that's true. And it also starts with either at the undergraduate level or, high school level, the students' exposures to individuals, or guest speakers, guest lecturers. One of the courses I taught had the opportunities, provided the opportunities for guest lectures. So students were enthralled by not just epidemiology, but various forms of public health based upon my speakers or so. And they reached out to those guest lecturers or so, the genetic epidemiologists, psychiatrists, physical therapists, as a medical doctor, dermatologists or so. So again, it's about the exposure you would have, at least on the college level, but high school level, it's a little bit harder. So it's not like you're having speakers or so, but you start again by researching Google, or again, your local School of Public Health or master's program in public health or so as a start.
Well, actually, that leads into my next question, because as I was doing some research, because I like research, I saw that there was a lack of diversity. African Americans, Latinos, and Native Americans in the epidemiology career field, as well as other public health fields. We're talking educators, scientists, things of that realm in public health. And this was information from like 2003, and we're in 2021 for the 21st century. Do you have any insights as to why there's such a lack of diversity in epidemiology as a career field, or public health in general?
My impressions are, again, most students think that you need a lot of math and you need a lot of sciences. For whatever reasons, some students are persuaded or dissuaded from taking those college prep courses, at least, which would prepare them for, a career in STEM, because that's what it is. I would consider, science, technology, right, electronic, engineering, mathematics itself, for various reasons, priorities in high school, let's say, still are, in terms of sports or so. So there are, many reasons in terms of, look at the number of, individuals available in terms of African American males in particular. Let's start off with that in terms of, are they going to college in general? And we see that not. You've got more African American females, higher rates of females who are going into college than males. So this pool is shrunk or is small from the beginning, let's say that. So we have the same problem with not necessarily epidemiology. We have the same problem, even worse problem with our medicine, becoming medical doctors in terms of number of minorities going there too.
So you're saying there might be a matter of maybe intimidation, that they need a lot of math, they need a lot of science, and the preparation in school. It might be money for going to school, maybe going to college, lack of role models, outreach to minorities, because the pool hasn't changed. It's 30% African American, for example. Native American, Latinos have grown, but it hasn't changed. So that outreach, those role models, should it start in college? Should it start in high school? How do we get there?
Right. It should start before then. It should start in middle school, in some cases elementary school. There are some programs whereby students are brought on campus to be exposed to certain careers, and those are the programs which see great success in a number of applicants later. You've got to put the work and the time in terms of investment in at an earlier age, and that's what it's about, being exposed. If it hadn't been for me being exposed to to science and math from middle school or so, who knows where I would have been or so. But it's about exposure for summer programs, medical explorers. That's the other thing which told me I did not want to be a doctor after a gross lab or so.
You're like, no.
I said, no, the formaldehyde, the smell there, in addition to comments my mom made about doctors, how me they were batches. But again, in terms of being proactive and preventive.
So if you're head of the department of science or public health or medicine, and you're saying, well, that pipeline is dried up, maybe it may be worthwhile to take a trip to the local high school or middle school and say, hey, I'm an epidemiologist. You ever thought of?
That's correct. Right. And we try to do that in venues like this, what you're doing, exposing to individuals to our various career options is what's needed. One of the professional organizations I'm affiliated with, we've considered doing something of this nature too, to let them know, hey, this is what an epidemiologist is about, and this is something you should consider. So participating in not only college courses or I guess college fairs itself, but touring campuses itself. You don't really get the opportunity to really get into careers. It's just more or less majors or looking at the college campus itself. So it's somewhat hard, but professional organizations kind of reaching down. It's up to us. Hey, we're having problems, so this is we try to participate in forums such as this to expose minorities in particular.
Well, let me ask you, why is there a need for diversity and inclusion in epidemiology? What's the point? I mean, why should, you talked about lupus as a personal thing, but why is that valuable to have inclusion and diversity?
Well, that's like being a medical doctor, let's say, or individuals require would like to have someone who looks like them because they can relate to them. So of the same color, not necessarily same gender, but of same color because of the socioeconomic issues, personal issues, which may prevent, hey, you need to exercise, you need to eat vegetables and fruits. Someone who African ancestry would understand better that, hey, it's not necessarily available if you're living in a project. So, you're living in what we call areas whereby there aren't, grocery stores with fresh produce, or someone would understand the issues were about multi-generational things what we consider personal. So an epidemiologist, me studying a disease which disproportionately affects African American women in particular in terms of lupus or other issues. It just so happened I regained the interest with sexual orientation based upon my collaboration with the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, as a project while I was waiting for lupus data, and that kind of mushroomed, even more so than the lupus, but it's still within the same niche as more or less health disparities. And I was able to look at a subcomponent which still gets back to the race itself. So it's good to have someone who can relate to you to do the research because they've been there. They would understand the concepts of, and that's in many professions, and epidemiology is one of them.
Well, let me go into, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are epidemiology career opportunities everywhere. Governmental agencies such as the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the National Institutes of Health, there's state and local health departments and agencies, nonprofits like the American Red Cross. There is a question in here. Healthcare organizations like hospitals, the private sectors, and college and universities and schools of public health or medicine. And then the website said that the outlook for epidemiologists is bright and growing. Explain why the need is so great for epidemiologists. We hear they're in the background, but why does everybody want this particular career? What's the value?
The value is you're preventing diseases. In a sense, you're studying. We need more individuals to study what the factors are associated with so many types of diseases. So we need the people to do that. Again, the infectious disease, chronic diseases or so, there's always been a requirement. As we see with the pandemic or so, there's a need for more researchers, to help us to at least develop more, vaccines or sooner with the variants. The public policy involved. It's just not necessarily the disease itself. Got component. There's the what does it mean, and how do we, advocate for better care, more access, or more funds.
Because some would have you believe that U.S. has the greatest healthcare in the system in the world, that everybody's healthy, that there are no diseases besides maybe heart disease and cancer and lung disease. But beyond that, everybody's healthy. But then you have a high rate of suicide among white males who are 50 and older.
Mm-hmm.
So epidemiologists will zone in on particular diseases and say, why is this happening? And what do we need to do as a response?
Actually, as the detective, right, you've got to do the work. So we cannot change what needs to be fixed until we investigate, right? So we need more investigators, we need more detectives. And not only in infectious and chronic disease like we're used to, we think of, it's only, what about other societal issues? There's an epidemiology of sexual childhood abuse. That's another area of concern, which, I'm actually involved with the childhood sexual prevention group here. Again, what about LGBT issues itself? Not only the disease, STIs, STDs or so, but the suicide, things of that nature. So we need individuals to study that. So there's so many social ills or problems out there. We need more and more people. But again, it's about money. It's so much cheaper if we can prevent it than actually treat it. Right. So let's
as opposed to they have the high blood pressure, the cholesterol problem, the heart disease. We prevent it.
We prevent it, right? But we have to study it so we can say, hey, this is why we need funding. Tell the congressman, representatives, hey, this is what's going on. These are the facts. These are true facts. It's not fake. This is what the facts are, and these are the statistics are the methods to use to show that these are actually true. These are the organizations which more or less back us up as the references, which requires us to do the reading. So, but we got the data.
All right. So, as an epidemiologist, not only are you dealing with the social aspects, you're dealing with the political aspects, and you're dealing with the economic aspects of a disease. And what's the best way as public health, prevent disease, prolong life, and promote health. And we have to make Americans aware that, there are a lot of diseases out there that instead of you living to be 60, you might be able to live to be 90 and healthy.
And healthy.
Yes. Okay. All right. Now, how do organizations such as the CDC, NIH, FDA, hospitals seek out candidates for jobs and internships? How does a person say, oh, I want to work at the CDC, or I want to work at the Food and Drug Administration, where you actually worked, as a matter of fact? How do you do that?
Well, it starts off with college career days or so. So they're advertising for positions or for individuals, but for government positions, primarily, one should be aware that you actually go to a special site, usa.gov. All right, that's after you've already acquired, you've earned your master's degree or so. Let's see, for individuals who are actually in high school and trying to go to college itself, there are few jobs. So, they're just trying to kind of work on their education. So they're not necessarily trying to work. That's more or less, they're looking into, again, what programs, what schools are out there. So sometimes they're getting guidance from.
So this is college graduates and postgraduates, and where they would
Correct.
go, and these NIH recruiting events, maybe their website or something like that. That's where these agencies actually publicize what jobs are available.
Correct. That's one way, as well as professional organization. As an epidemiologist, there are several organizations I can be affiliated with. One in particular, American College of Epidemiology, which is more or less, trying to increase the number of minorities as epidemiologists or so. We have a formal journal or so, whereby our website, whereby we have careers, or individuals who are looking for jobs. So you go here. Another organization which I'm affiliated, Society of Epidemiological Research or so, as like a job bank or so. And it just so happens, it's based upon the position, not necessarily the organization. It just so happens either if the CDC is looking, whatever, NIH, it will come up more or less under that particular website. So a lot of schools say, hey, we're looking for professors. They advertise, during your national conventions or our website. You've got the Epimonitor, where there's a list of positions for academic as well as government or so, where they're looking for epidemiologists, not necessarily at the PhD level, but at the master's level as well.
And you're also a member of the American Public Health Association. Is that another place that they
Right.
can look for
Correct.
careers
MPH,
and jobs?
Right. Well, primarily for master's level students. Exactly. They're one of the largest, I guess, are epi type our public health organizations in the country. Membership over, I believe, in terms of at least who attend conferences, over 30,000. They're much larger than the conferences I normally attend, 2,000 or so, where people know me or so. But they are, are highly, I guess, detailed, and there are many sub organizations, components of epidemiology for men, LGBT issues or whatever, minority women issues, you name it.
So join a society and look on their website, and you'll get information about conferences and jobs and everything like. So don't just be like this, I'm getting my degree. Actually look out and see what's available to you. Okay, well, that sounds fantastic. Now, we've gone through epidemiologists, what they do, some places they can go if you're in college and you want to go into that particular field. What is the work environment like? Are you like in a research lab all the time? Are you going to developing countries? Do you have long hours? Does it depend on the employer? What's the work environment like?
Exactly, as they say in France, ça dépend. It depends. So let's just get a few examples. Let's say, while I was working, let's say for the FDA, we would have meetings which would involve our various professions, whereby we're trying to determine whether or not the drugs which are out now. In particular, my area of interest was what we call photon pump inhibitors, like acid reflux, drugs. So,
all right.
All right. So the next.
You had to break it down for me. I was like, what?
Right. the Nexium, the Nexium, what is it? Prilosec and things like that. When drugs are approved, they're followed for a certain amount of years to see whether or not there are more side effects that we necessarily know about, while they were being approved or tested for approval. So at a certain period of time, that comes time for whether or not let's say the label has to be at least are changed, or so there are more negative effects or so, or we'll call it, there are more warnings need to be placed on the drug label itself, called black box warning, the most serious type of warning. And so, but years before, they didn't necessarily include epidemiologists. So more recently, within the last 10 to 15 years, that's what I'm saying, epidemiologists just include, they realized the importance of epidemiologists. Actually, it was an epidemiologist who brought to the attention the negative concerns of Vioxx, which was leading to heart problems, which was used, and which they eventually took off the market. But it was an epidemiologist who was finally invited on the team.
So work me back to the work environment.
Right. Okay. So thank you. Right. So it just depends. You have meetings or so, in terms of which includes several, various people, different professions, or let's say, like I said, the epidemiologist, biostatistician or so. But it depends. That's from the FDA environment. You're working independently to look at the document which said, hey, this is the drug and this is the way in which we went about it. So you're more working independently. As a professor, of course, it's different. You're teaching, so that's part of the day. Which you're doing research like I did, so that takes a lot of time. You're advising students, so you're attending other meetings or so, which pertains to various programs of the campus, of the profession of the school itself. So
let me ask you this. I've seen the movie Contagion. So the epidemiologists, are they the ones going, depending on the employer, are they going to the site and seeing what was the disease and what was the location? And so that may be another thing that an epidemiologist might do.
Oh, absolutely. So, and that's more so for individuals who are working, let's say, with the health department, let's say a state or a city department itself. As a professor or epidemiologist, it's totally different. We aren't necessarily doing the contagion or so, but state or city health department individuals would be the ones who would be, doing the research or the investigation itself.
So there's a wide, from what I'm getting from what your explanation, there's a wide variety of what an epidemiologist can do. It's just a matter of doing the research, talking to the professionals in the field, going to the websites for the societies, and just saying, oh, I'm really passionate about this, and this is what I can do. And so let me ask you, is there a career progression that's linear for an epidemiologist? Because from what I've seen from your career, from what we just discussed like a minute ago, it doesn't seem like there's a linear progression. It just seems like where you feel you can best put yourself into a particular situation.
Right. It depends upon the organization, to be honest. So there may be within the State Department, normally, the jobs are great, or so there's, an epidemiologist. In many cases at the master's level, is not necessarily a requirement for, a PhD level. So in that case, you start off as what we call a basic researcher, and you may become, let's say, a department head for different types of diseases itself. So in that sense, there are some, upward mobility in terms of opportunity to progress or so. And others, it just depends. Let's say pharmaceutical biotech company or so, you're being hired for that particular job. Again, normally there are opportunities for a larger class of the disease or so. So it just varies itself. But again, it's based upon your degree, in most cases, and the entity, the organization that you're working for.
Well, let me ask you this. You have a degree in modern languages, French.
Yes.
And with that being said, has your French language helped you? And if it has, do you recommend that epidemiologists have maybe French or Spanish, because Spanish is prevalent throughout the United States? And if you're talking to somebody about a particular disease, wouldn't it be better to speak in their language? What do you think about that? Is it necessary? That's what I'm asking.
In general, you should speak more than one language. When we travel abroad, just a personal I guess example was when I went to France and I used some French. So
they were shocked, weren't they?
They were shocked. They said, "No,
pleasantly surprised."
Right? They were. They said, "You must be from Britain." I said, "No." They said, "Well," I said, "Why would you say that?" Because they said Americans don't know how to speak any other language. Because and so I said, "Wow."
Okay. Hang our head in shame.
Right. So that was one reason. But beyond that, let's say as individuals constantly reading and researching, we receive our various sources for our work, our research, and sometimes they're not in English. There have been many cases whereby they were in French, at least the abstracts, a summary. So I can read the summary and see whether or not this is something which would be, pertinent to what I'm doing, either in French or in Spanish or whatever. So that's helped many times, whereby I was able to read the document. Now, my pronunciation, since I don't use it all the time, is not the best. However, the words are so come in handy. I'm familiar with the words since I'm constantly being exposed to French, and it's helped in several ways, in several instances whereby I was able to read and understand the abstract to see whether or not it was something in which I needed, and which eventually could be translated if needed. But I on my own, I didn't necessarily have to wait a week to see whether or not this is something I could use. I was able to read it myself and say, "Oh, okay, I know what that means. Oh, this is something else, or it's not."
So it opened up the amount of information that you had available, because not to say, hey, a lot of diseases come out of places like Latin America or countries in Africa. But if the research comes, for example, COVID-19, the Omicron came out of South Africa. They speak English, yes, of course. Sure. But if it was someplace else where the language was French, you would be able to read it and understand what's going on, as opposed to you have to wait for the translation.
Absolutely right, because America is great, but right, there are geniuses all over the world. So we're conducting the research. So more likely they're going to publish it initially in their own language, but eventually they'll be able to convert it or translate it. Some translations done, but the initial work itself, papers or so, which you'll have access to, there are different language you can read. That's even better. So, and that's helped me, like I said, in several instances.
All right, so. According to Career One Stop, which I talked about before, that career website, epidemiologists can earn the median salary was $74,560 in May 2020. What determines greater pay in the profession? What is going to get you more money? Where you work, or more time and grade? What?
Sure, of course, your degree. So, of course, those who have an MPH or MS in epidemiology compared to those who have a PhD, more like PhD would normally make more. That just makes sense. Uh, the geography, believe it or not, is the cost of living. So most jobs, it could be an epidemiologist in San Fran compared to an epidemiologist in, let's say, Charleston, South Carolina, my hometown. Those in San Fran or New York would make more because the cost of living is higher. The number of years, as you alluded to, and what you've been in a particular position in general. So the experience that you required, your skills, there are some certifications in which you have. Sometimes you get a bonus for that, like SAS. That's one of the statistical analysis projects or software which you use. If you're SAS certified, the basic or intermediate or advanced, there are some perks, which are monetary, which would determine how much more you would be making. So if you travel, let's say if you're flying as an epidemiologist, you can do physiology. So there's a flight pay associated with your research, military or as a civilian. So primarily based upon your experiences, but the geography and your degree, like I guess like other positions too, but more. I guess it's similar for epidemiologists as well.
Okay, well, this is fascinating because you just opening my eyes to what the different things that you can do as an epidemiologist, opposed to just having on a lab coat and some kind of office setting or a lab, and you're like, whatever. You're actually going out there and exposing yourself to what the diseases are and how you can actually come up with a response. Now, I'm going to ask this question because I always ask this question.
Okay.
What advice to those high school or undergraduate college students who are unsure if epidemiology as a career is worth their time and effort to pursue? What is your advice to them? Because you've already said why you like it, but why would this be something that they would want to get into?
Well, I guess let's say or decide if it's not. What do you want? Do you like dealing with data, or do you like dealing with individuals or people? Let's say you want to make a difference dealing with people in your personal, you think that's something you can do. Medicine may be the best option for you there. And you say, hey, I want to do better. I want to be proactive, preventive or so, and analyze the data, and I'm pretty good in science and in math or so, then that may be a field for you. But it's just being exposed to, a slew of various careers, seeing what you like and what you don't like. Meeting with someone, if you can shadow, of course, because of COVID now, that's kind of more or less impossible these days itself, but getting a general idea of the various options for, let's say, an epidemiologist, this is something in which you would be interested in. And then, of course, just speaking with someone, like in any position, but as an epidemiologist. And recently, I guess, because of COVID, I think the epidemiologist or public health individual has received more attention or so. So I think they have a general idea of what epidemiology is about. Dr. Fauci, he's a medical doctor as an epidemiologist, but he's more so a medical doctor, per se, a researcher. And we talked about researchers. So epidemiologists aren't necessarily in the labs. So that's more environmental sciences, like my son, environmental science. Epidemiologists analyzing primarily the data. So there's no need to dissect rats or mice or pigs or things of that nature. You're analyzing or dissecting the data sets or so, the data, and you're producing the results there. So just doing the homework again, as I stress, trying to locate a local health professional or epidemiologist in your area and try to speak with them, high school level, but college level, starting off with the professors who may be epidemiologists, because most of the students who joined the program had been teaching for 5 years, and hey, they wanted to pursue epidemiology based upon taking a course. They took a course as an elective. They thought it was be fun, because of the spying or the detective component of diseases, looking at outbreaks or because contagion or something like that. And they saw the various facets of that profession. So that's what lured them. So if there's some drive, so follow up.
So it's having a passion for numbers, having a passion for research, and epidemiologists can be rock stars because the public has never before known what an epidemiologist was, but now they do. and it's doing the research, and not just possibly, you want to speak to someone who is an epidemiologist so you can see the wide breadth of what's available to you as a student and
Oh,
for occupations.
right, absolutely. They can be a rock star, or they can be loathed and hated too. Everyone doesn't
Oh, really?
everyone doesn't like Dr. Fauci, but he tells the truth. But for the most part, yeah.
Well, data, facts. I mean,
Right,
the facts
exactly.
don't
That's
lie.
right. Facts don't lie. Amen. Absolutely. And that's a fact no matter what. Facts don't lie. Sure.
But you can still be hated.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's at any job.
Well, that's true too. But any job doesn't have the impact on public health as an epidemiologist. That's the distinction. Okay. Well, Robert, it has been a pleasure, a true pleasure to have you on Employer Speaks. I have learned so much about the career, and I know any high school or college student who's viewing this will be like, wow, let me do a little bit more research. Let me Google it in terms of something that I might want to pursue as a high school student later on in college. And do you have any other things that you would like to say? Any closing words?
No, again, the pleasure has been all mine. It just so happens that things happen for a reason. And in terms of my love for epidemiology was a result of a personal, I guess, experience in terms of my aunt being sick and losing members to the disease, and how it's changed my life in terms of career and the opportunities of doing research with lupus. Started off, which is looking at the differences by race. Now we're into the genetic component or so, being able to predict individuals not only with lupus, but more serious involvement. And it's been a result of just simple things from my, undergraduate exposures, even with my degree in French or so, flying experiences, and, being able to being awarded, NIH grants or so, loan repayments or so, that are because it started off with a love, and I pursued that love, and we're trying to make a difference, and it's expanded in other ways in terms of other research, because the skills which you acquire as an epidemiologist can be used not just for one disease, can be used for many, not just, again, infectious and chronic disease, but social ills, like I said, sexual childhood abuse, LGBT issues, and so forth, our endangered individuals, are trafficking themselves. So those are the skills which can be used in any component. So you're getting more for your bang, or more bang for your buck. And so as an epidemiologist, but it's been a pleasure and an honor to actually talk about, I'm passionate about, and hopefully I'll be doing for many years to come.
Well, thank you so much. And as you point out, those skills, we talked about communication, critical analysis, problem solving, they are transferable. You can use them anywhere. And hopefully as an epidemiologist, it won't be a personal thing that you have a family member or friend who has a disease. Hopefully that won't be the case. But if that is the case, then you can use those skills to hopefully find some way to prevent it, to cure it. Or if it's just something you're interested in, you can find ways to prevent it, cure it.
Yes.
And epidemiology is just such a well of great information, a well of such hopes for the health of Americans, well, and actually any population. So thank you so much again, Robert, for being here on Employer Speaks, and you have a wonderful, wonderful day.
You too. Thank you. Good day.